allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kate, would you please call the roll?
Sure. Gary Cunningham.
Here.
Doug Bryson.
Here.
Deanna Hinton. Here. Steve Griffiths.
Here.
Riley Hoagland.
Here.
Bruce Robinson.
Here. Do we have any agenda changes? No. All right, we're on to minutes. Do I have a motion to approve August 16, 2016? Hold up, please, before you do that. Kate, there's a typo on page 7. Returning now to something rather must, should be much.
Page 7. So where's this on page 7?
Zoom down there. I'm just showing off, so you know I read it. Let's see. Is that section 7 or page 7?
Section 7.
Under section 7, option B.
Returning now to is the phrase.
Okay.
That's right. That would be the end of all the sections.
Where are you, Bruce? Oh.
I'll find it. Let's move on. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve the minutes from our last meeting,
Second
August
it.
16th.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, public comments on non-agenda items or matters not involving a public hearing. Please limit comments to 3 minutes per speaker. Keep in mind you're being broadcast on live television. Does anybody want to speak? Final orders, resolutions, we have nothing scheduled. On to public hearings and deliberations. It's now 6:03 p.m. The public hearing for file CPA and ZC 2016-02 is now open. This public hearing concerns a property owner initiated proposal to rezone portions of 4 tax lots from Park P to single-family residential R15. The subject properties are located south of Southwest Beach and Coast Avenues and west of Southwest 51st Street in the Taft neighborhood. The subject properties are portions of Lot 4, 5, 6, and 7 within a subdivision recorded as the Point. How do you pronounce that? Point? Point. The applicant and property owner is Picture Book Properties and Investments Incorporated. Planning Commission's role in this process is to consider any written or oral comments or testimony, as well as information from staff, and make a recommendation to the City Council, who will hold an additional public hearing. The City Council may adopt the Planning Commission recommendation, may adopt a different recommendation, or may take other action. The Commission must take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the Commission wish to declare an ex parte contact, conflict of interest, or bias in this matter? None. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the qualifications of a commissioner or to participate in this matter? None. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to consider this matter? No. Following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing. pursuant to City Code and ORS 197-763-5. Staff will now read a list of the applicable substantive criteria for this decision.
The amendment must be found in conformance with the statewide planning goals, the comprehensive plan, and the applicable provisions of the zoning ordinance.
Thank you. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria previously listed or such other criteria in the plan or land use regulations which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issues precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the decision maker to respond to the issue precludes any action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the end of this hearing, any person who participated may request a continuance to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence, or request that the record be left open to submit additional written testimony, argument, or evidence. Before the staff presents a report, I would like to summarize the adopted public hearing procedures. A brochure outlining procedures is at the entrance to the council chambers. Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows: preliminary matters and required statements, staff report, questions of staff, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, requests of continuances or to leave the record open, close of the hearing, close of the record, requests to submit written argument, deliberations, and recommendation. The city has established some time limits. The applicant will have 15 minutes and may reserve up to 5 minutes of that time for rebuttal. After the applicant testifies, any person may speak for up to 3 minutes. If the Planning Commission has questions, your time responding to any questions will not be counted in your time limit. If you wish to speak, please write your name and mailing address clearly on the sign-up list at the entrance. Please speak directly into the microphone and begin by stating your name. If you also have written testimony to submit into the record, please provide a copy to the recorder. Please present the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. This is a request for rezoning, actually partial rezoning of 4 lots in the Taft Heights area. To show you where it is, it's at the extreme southern ends of Southwest Coast and Southwest Beach Avenues above Taft. This picture, you can see in the lower right corner, there's the Taft turnaround and the Taft dock. These 4 lots that I'm marking here are the ones affected. You can see that they're undeveloped. The area to be rezoned is the area in green here on these 1, 2, 3, 4 lots. The lots are in part already zoned R15, and the request would change the park zoning, the green zoning on the remainder of the lots also to R15. Well, let me zoom in a little bit. You can see a little closer. Again, it's these 4 lots. The dashed black line running through here is it's called the vegetation line, and areas seaward of that are subject to, they're either under the control of the state or subject to a public easement so that people have complete access to the beach. So as a practical matter, what we're talking about, what gets affected is the area north of the vegetation line, because nothing can be done on the area south of the vegetation line. And as you can see here, the closeness of these contour lines, much of this is very, very steep land. This isn't going to be built on anyway. There's right at the edge of the beach at the vegetation line, the elevation's about 20 feet. At the top of the bluff, it's 90 to 100 feet. So there's a substantial amount of elevation there. The one thing it's important to understand in this is privately owned land. It's not public land. And I believe it's the only place in the city that's private land that's zoned park. And really what we're trying to do here is to correct a mistake, because it shouldn't be zoned park. And in one sense, it never was zoned park. There were zoning maps adopted that showed it as park, but at the time we didn't have a park zone. We've only had a park zone since 2002, I believe it was. So going back in history here a little bit, this is the 1977 zoning map. And some of these are going to be a little bit blurry, but it's just because I had to blow them up so much. The area we're talking about is here at the bottom of South and Beach Avenues. You can see it's zoned R5, which was the zone in effect then. And there was some RC zone, which is the Taft area. And then there's something called Taft City Park here. One thing that's clear is that it doesn't go up north of the right-of-way of 51st. If 51st were extended, unlike here, well, let's see, you can see here's 51st right here, and you can see that currently it does go north of what would be the right-of-way of 51st. So then in 81, again, we have the R5 zone, the RC zone, the area we're talking about just right in here. This was all R5. Then on the 84 zoning map, we have the R5 zone. Again, the property we're talking about is right here. We have the R5 zone here, RC zone here, and then there's something with a P on it, which in the key stands for park, but it doesn't stand for park zone. It just says this is where a park is. And then, and this one's really blurry, but I want to show you what then happened the next time they did a map in '92. We had the R5, the RC, and all of a sudden P became not just a park, but a park zone, even though there was no such thing as park zone at the time. So that got us to, again, to where we are now, where this error was carried forward on map after map, and our current map shows that as being zoned park. In the staff report, I go into the planning goals, or the statewide planning goals, and our comprehensive plan goals, and I'll just quickly run through a few highlights of them. All the public services are already in place, so there's no need for extension of public services. It's all within the urban growth boundary and the city limits, so it's not going to be not new urbanization that would be involved. The area is subject to natural hazards, the coastal erosion, but any development that would happen there, no matter what, would be subject to our geotechnical analysis. This doesn't allow anything that wouldn't already be allowed, subject to the geotechnical analysis. It wouldn't adversely affect any housing, because it would just, housing's already allowed there. And it's in the coastal shorelands, and development's already allowed on the property, because anything west of Highway 101 is in the coastal shorelands for the city. Those are the main things, and it's true for both the statewide planning goals and our comprehensive plan goals. I refer you to the staff report for more detail on them, but I don't think, that we need to go into them in depth. It's in the record. So with that, I would just say if you have any questions, I think the staff recommends that you do recommend to the city council that they rezone the property. So that concludes the staff report.
I see the 4 lots where they're partially zoned park. What about the other green areas there? What is that zoned as?
That is park. That's city-owned property. You talking about these lots down here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that actually is park. That's city-owned parkland. City-owned parkland.
And so the public would still have access to everything that's south of the vegetation line And that includes that road that people use to go get back, drive onto
Right.
the beach and get driftwood?
Right, if you look on this one, well, you look on this, anything, I don't know if you can see it, kind of, the road kind of runs right along the vegetation line, just seaward of the vegetation line. And that is subject to a public easement by state law.
Okay. Thank
And it
you.
would continue to be, whether it's zoned park or R15.
I have a question. I noticed that the land use application was not filled out by you, but actually the picture book properties and investments.
Right.
Did they have to pay for that?
Yes, they did. There are a number of park properties that are shown as park zone that aren't really that were never formally put into the park zone properly. And we have several of them that it needs to be done for. And because there's so many and so widespread, we wanted to do it in one of our sort of our mass mailings that we do, where we send out notice citywide. And the applicant didn't want to wait for that. We had discussed it with them, and they were willing to wait for a while, and then they changed their mind and decided they wanted to go ahead and do it themselves.
How long is a while?
Pardon me?
How long is a while? When is your mass mailing?
It's one of those things that we haven't scheduled it yet, so it would be as we get time to deal with it. It's pretty high on our list, but not at the top yet.
And this might seem like a funny question, but because the error was made by the city previous additions to the mapping, it just seems wrong for that they would have to pay the application fee. I understand you're trying to do that all at once, but can you split the difference or something?
That would be up to the council. As an administrator, I don't have that kind of authority, and so it'd be totally up to the council.
Any other questions? Excuse me?
You need to hear from the applicant first.
No more questions? Okay. Thank you, sir. We have the applicant's presentation, please. Please sit down and speak into the microphone. Ma'am,
Properties.
microphone, please.
Here.
Yes.
Hi. Ann Thompson. I work for my Picture Book Properties, and actually I am the one who prepared the application for the zone change. And well, the real reason we're doing this is that Picture Book several years ago purchased these properties that comprise now this it was originally 8, it's now a 7-unit subdivision. And what we would like to do is just unify the zoning on the property. So basically, I don't have to say to someone, well, Lot 4 has this little bit of park designation in it, and Lot 5 has, more designation. If we can just change the zoning to conform to, the single-family residential. And of course, it won't change any usage for the public at all. In fact, let me see, in the last winter, I got one of those emergency phone calls from the fire department, saying they needed to rebuild the road, and all they needed was like us to say yes, and that we have no problem with that at all. We're not seeking to restrict anyone's access to the part by the coast, just that we'd like is to unify the zoning on the property. It was first discussed, I think, at the beginning of the year. I think it was in February. And when it came about 2 months ago, we just decided, well, we should really just go ahead, because what we'd like to do is, well, they are up for sale, and we'd like to improve the chances that they will actually sell. And we do have purchasers who are interested, and I'm trying to mitigate the problems or questions that they have. I can answer pretty much any questions you have about this.
Any questions? Sir?
I think I have the location in my mind where this is at. And if I'm correct, isn't there a sign up there that says public park?
What I think you're referring to is Picture Book donated Lot 2 to the city. So there is two spaces of regular parking and one of handicap parking, so that the public has the opportunity to enjoy the view also. So yes, that would be, if that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, so that's not part of any of these properties we're talking about.
No, that was what we called Lot 2. And
Okay.
these are Lot 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
Could you point out Lot 2 to us on the map?
I'll
With the
come
mouse.
out.
Oh, okay. I believe that is
Right there.
here.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, that's the one. It's actually the biggest lot that we had.
And that'll continue to be zoned as a park?
I don't know how it's zoned. I know
It's-
it's been dedicated. to
That
the
lot is owned by the city, and it's zoned R15 right now. And at some point, when we do all these park rezonings, that will go into park zone.
Okay.
Questions? Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. It's time for testimony in support of the application. I have a sign-up sheet here of Ann Thompson. That was Ann Thompson? Yes. Troy Dry. Okay. Okay, yeah, they are. Okay. Testimony in opposition to the applicant. Others, including any testimony from representatives of public agencies. None. All right, ORS Section 197763, Paragraph 6A states that upon request, the commission must either grant a continuance for no less than 7 days or hold the record open for no less than 7 days to permit any participant an opportunity to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence. Does any person who participated desire to request a continuance to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence, or request that the record be left open to submit additional written testimony, argument, or evidence? No. Is there a motion to close the public hearing and the record?
Motion, we close the public hearing and the record.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Kate?
Griffiths,
Yes.
Hoagland,
Yes.
Bryson,
Yes.
Hinton,
Yes.
Cunningham,
Yes.
and Robinson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Does the applicant waive the opportunity to submit final written argument after the close of the record is provided in ORS Section 197.763, Paragraph 6A? Thank you. Does the city attorney or staff have any comments concerning legal issues raised during these proceedings, instructions on the applicable law, or legal advice concerning the application of the law to the evidence in the record?
Not really.
No.
Then this matter is returned to the table for deliberations and recommendation.
It's a simple error we need to correct. I think it's a simple error we need to correct.
Sounds like a consensus. We have a motion.
A motion that we approve the variance or the change to R15 from the park zone.
It's a recommendation.
I recommend to the council that we move to change the zoning from park zone to R15 for these 4 lots.
Second.
Second?
Kate?
Hinton,
Yes.
Hoagland,
Yes.
Griffiths,
Yes.
Bryson,
Yes.
Cunningham,
Yes.
Robinson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
This matter is scheduled for a public hearing at the City Council on Monday, October 24th, 2016, at 6 p.m. It is now 6:25 p.m. The public hearing for file VAR 2016-02 is now open. The subject of this hearing is a request for variance to allow replacement of a deck with a reduced side yard setbacks. The variance requested is to reduce the side yard for an unroofed deck from 5 feet to 3 feet 4 inches. The subject property is 1855 Northwest 50th Street in the R1A residential Lincoln County zone in the Rhodes End neighborhood. The applicant is Dale's Remodeling, Inc., and the property owner is Don Wall. Because quasi-judicial proceedings require the observance of certain procedural safeguards, the Commission must take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the Commission wish to declare an ex parte conflict of interest or bias in this matter? No, none. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the qualifications of a commissioner to participate in this matter? No. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the Commission to consider this matter? No. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to City Code and ORS 197-763-5. Staff will now read a list of applicable substantive criteria for this decision.
The criteria we're using are Lincoln County Zoning Ordinance 1.1315, Residential Zone R1A, and Lincoln County Zoning Ordinance 1.1801, variances.
Thank you. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria previously listed, or such other criteria in the plan or land use regulations which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the decision maker to respond to the issue precludes any action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the end of this hearing, any person who participated may request a continuance to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence, or request that the record be left open to submit additional written testimony, argument, or evidence. Before the staff presents a report, I would like to summarize the adopted public hearing procedures. A brochure outlining procedures is at the entrance of the council chambers. Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows: preliminary matters and required statements, staff report, questions of staff, applicant's presentation, those in support of the request, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, requests of continuances or to leave the record open, close of the hearing, close of the record, requests to submit written argument, deliberations, and decision. The city has established some time limits. The applicant will have 15 minutes and may reserve up to 5 minutes of that time for rebuttal. After the applicant testifies, any person may speak for up to 3 minutes. If the Planning Commission has questions, your time responding to them will not be counted in your time limit. If you wish to speak, please write your name and mailing address clearly on the sign-up list at the entrance. Please speak directly into the microphone and begin by stating your name. If you also have written testimony to submit into the record, please provide a copy to the recorder. Please present the staff report.
Thank you. As you heard, the applicant seeks a variance to allow an unroofed deck that would encroach into the required side yard setback by up to 20 inches. This is the location. It is 1855 Northwest 50th Street. It's in Rhodes End. The border between Rhodes End and the rest of the city is 50th Street. So this is the Lincoln Star Resorts on the south side. Now, of course, it's all in the city, but Lincoln County zoning still applies in Rhodes End. So, the original construction on this house, right here, was in 2005 before Rhodes End became part of the Lincoln City. The assessor information shows it is 1,632 square feet on the main area with an 864 square foot basement and a 736 square foot garage. According to the applicant, the only doors to the home are on the south side facing the street, and the main entrance is on the upper level, which is right here, and then there is a sliding glass door in the walkout basement and the garage. When Don Wall purchased the house in 2007, the house had a deck on the west side. You can see the deck wraps around to the west side. Recently, the owner's contractor, the applicant, Troy Young, found substantial dry rot and removed the deck. So here we are today, no deck, and the owners would like to build a new deck. The applicant applied for a building permit, and he was showing a 5-yard setback, which is what would be required. The staff approved the site plan, but the building inspector went out to the site and discovered the side yard setback was actually less than 4 feet. So that's why we're here tonight. The Lincoln County Code section talks about projections, including, and I've paraphrased here, not all of this, this doesn't include the whole section, but it says that projections into side yards, unroofed porches may project into any required yard, providing no such projection shall extend more than 1/3 the distance from the exterior wall to the property line. So, I guess I better back up a minute. No, that's all I guess I need to say about that. The side yards in the Lincoln County R1A zone vary with building height. So back when the house was built, the county staff identified the building as 22.75 feet in height, requiring a 7-foot 7-inch side yard. Then the unroofed deck may encroach 1/3 into that, and so the minimum setback for that deck should be 5 feet. So this is the request. The deck is 5 feet that they're showing at the ends of the wall, and the wall is not straight across, so it makes it a little more complicated for us, but it angles toward a point in the middle. So at the ends, the deck would be 5 feet in width, and then it would narrow to the point where it would be only 30 inches or 2.5 feet in width. So the remaining setback that leaves is essentially, and also the house is sitting a bit at an angle. So at the south end, the remaining setback would be 3 feet 4 inches, and at the north end, it would be 3 feet 10 inches. Okay, is that clear? All right. So the commission may authorize variances where, owing to a special and unusual circumstances of a specific property, strict application of the ordinance would cause an undue or unnecessary hardship. And this is, I'm quoting here the Lincoln County Code, which is, well, I'm not exactly quoting it, but it's the same as what we use in Lincoln City. Okay, the criteria are very similar to what the Lincoln City Ordinance has. There are a couple extra ones, and so I'll call those out when I get to them. The first one is, I'm sure familiar to you, that there has to be exceptional or extraordinary circumstances that apply to this property that don't apply to generally to other properties in the same zone or vicinity. And this one specifies that they result from a lot size or shape legally existing prior to 1974, topography, or other circumstances over which the applicant has no control. So, steep topography was cited in the application as the extraordinary circumstance. And it is steep. The lot is about 138 feet at the top. It's about 112 feet at the bottom. It's about a 32% slope. Even just in the footprint of the house, it's 20-foot slope. On this side of the lot, the east side of the lot, it's not quite, it's still 30. It's not quite as steep, but it's still 30. So you can see, however, that topography also is an issue for the surrounding property owners. So this is not that unusual on this street, certainly. The construction of the house directly west, this one's under construction in this street view photo from 2012. It reportedly altered the topography of the side yard on the subject property. You can see that they did some leveling on that side of the property line. I'm trying to point, there we are. The commission must decide whether the circumstances of this property are exceptional or extraordinary to the extent that they justify a variance. That's the first criteria. The second criteria is that the variance is necessary for the preservation of a property right of the applicant, which is substantially the same as owners of other property in the same zone or vicinity possess. The applicant states that having no doors on the side or the rear of the house, combined with steep side yards, limits ability to properly maintain the grounds in the building. The applicant implies but does not state that the west side deck would provide the necessary access for maintenance of the house and yard, which they consider to be a property right. On the other hand, the city attorney, you may recall, advises that a property right for a lot in a single-family zone is the ability to have a house, have a single-family house, and a substantial house and garage exist on the lot. Back to whether this is extraordinary or unusual, I just will added a few pictures from the block in here that show that not all walls and windows are accessible from decks. Decks are popular. There are ocean views from the deck, so you know that's a good reason to have decks. But you can see that there are a number of windows on these houses that cannot be accessed by a deck. All right, number 3, the variance should not be materially detrimental to the purposes of this ordinance or to property in the zone or vicinity in which the property is located or otherwise conflict with objectives of any planning policy. The deck would be more than 3 feet from the property line. And so the building inspector is not concerned about fire hazard. So that's a good thing. Setbacks are a community standard set through legislative action and have to do with aesthetics, air and light, as well as fire safety. So that is something that I believe is up to the Planning Commission to decide whether that would infringe on that, on the air, light, and aesthetics. Staff has not received any correspondence from the owner of the house directly west or other neighboring properties suggesting that the deck would be detrimental. So again, I'm leaving that up to you to decide. All right, the fourth criteria is that the hardship is not self-imposed, and the variance requested is the minimum variance that would alleviate the hardship. The original design of the house and the yard did not provide for very level access around the house, except for the second-story deck, and it did not offer any additional doors. Unfortunately, the county didn't have a policy in 2005 to go out and check setbacks at the time of construction. And so they accepted what was shown on the plan, and construction was ended up being closer to the lot line, apparently, than what was intended. So the current owners and the contractor wrongly assumed that that it met setbacks, and so they removed the deck, the original deck, because of rot, and with the expectation that they could rebuild. So this expectation that turned out not to be true is not necessarily in itself a hardship. Okay, so is it the minimum that, then continuing on with that same, with this same criteria, is it the minimum variance that would alleviate the hardship? I talked with the applicant about the deck and possibly reducing if you were to allow a deck to be rebuilt, reducing it so that it's not, the deck is not 5 feet at the corners, but that it actually follows the line of the wall, so that it would be the minimum that it is right in the middle, 3 feet, let's say 30 inches, 2.5 feet. So, and I don't know, I haven't talked to him about whether he's proposing an alternative that would be even less of an intrusion. But just to go over here so you can see that at the ends, 5 foot of deck and 3 feet 10 inches of setback. In the middle, well, and of course the deck, he's showing a straight side here. So this dimension just varies slightly because of the angle that the house is sitting on the lot. So at this end, it's 3 feet 4 inches, and still you're getting a 5 foot deck. Does everyone understand the way that, okay, all right. Now, the hardship, the fifth criteria is that the hardship does not arise from a violation of the provisions of this chapter. This is a county criteria that we don't have, and I would say that the hardship here, if you decide one exists, is a result of the violation back in 2005 when the house was built, not according to site plan. So the violation was the construction of the deck that encroached at that time into the setback. So, and unfortunately, it established an expectation for a non-conforming deck. And so, let's see. Oh, I did not make a slide for numbers 6 and 7. 6 and 7 both refer to the floodplain, so that is not relevant in this case. This is not in a flood hazard zone. So the recommendation is that if all variance criteria, and this is just right out of our codes, if all the criteria are met or can be met with conditions, the commission should make findings and stipulate the extent and size of the allowed encroachment and any conditions. if the planning commission finds even one of the criteria or circumstances for approval does not exist, the commission must deny the request. So, just to recap here, and you may want to refer back to this when you are deliberating. The first one is exceptional circumstances. The second, preservation of a property right. The third is that it's not detrimental. The fourth, it's not self-imposed and it is the minimum necessary. And fifth, the hardship does not arise from a violation of the chapter. There we go, there's 6 and 7, they're not applicable. And again, you know, if you decide you want to attach conditions to protect the interests of the surrounding neighborhood, I'm not sure what they would be in this case, but that is up to you. So that is my presentation. Do you have any questions?
Questions? Please.
My question is about, I'm having a hard time with only one exterior door. I know there's a slider downstairs, but is that acceptable? If we were building a new house, would we allow the house without a back door, without another access?
Well, they do have egress in case of emergency. They can go out a window. And I think that, you know, that's the building code standard.
Okay.
I don't know that we would have any door requirement.
Okay.
With that egress, would this deck provide more security or provide a better egress method in case of an emergency?
Well, you could ask the applicant about their thinking on that. I don't really have a response to that, I guess.
Thank you.
Without the deck there, now
Yes.
that it's been removed, is the setback okay?
Yes. I do notice, if I can get back to the construction picture, it appears, and I'm not sure about this, and the applicant can speak to this, but it appears that maybe they have a deck underneath as well, and I don't know their plans for extending that outward, because the deck on the plans that we see is the upper deck.
But right now, looking at that, it's within the setback requirement, right?
I can't tell you for sure.
Okay.
And I could have gone out and measured, the variance request is for the upper deck. I don't know, but that would be a good thing to clarify with the applicant.
Self-imposed in this case means the builder made the mistake.
Well, I think we have to be careful about, it wasn't this applicant, it wasn't this owner back in 2005, but that deck is gone. And so what we're talking about today is, can these people who own it and are working on it today build a deck that encroaches?
Was the deck there when they bought it?
The deck was there when they bought it.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
On page 4, they show the west elevation. There's no windows in that diagram, and it just is kind of throwing me off. I'm trying to see where the deck would be according to the window that that angle there. There's no windows on that picture, on the drawing itself, so I'm...
Well, it looks to me as if it pretty much extends, all the windows extend the whole way across up above.
I understand. I'm just trying to see the deck height. Is it the bottom of that bay window, if you want to call that, whatever that...
Okay. The applicant
Okay.
can tell you, can explain that.
Further questions? Thank you.
Okay, I'll leave this photograph up, and their applicant is welcome to move it around.
Interesting.
Other ones
Ask if they put the windows in later.
Yes, sir, please.
Good evening. My name's Don Wall. I'm the owner, and this is Troy Young. He's the applicant. I appreciate that he applied for this while I was gone on vacation when all of this came up. I wanted to, first of all, thank the Commission for hearing this and taking the time to look at it and review it, and also thank Troy for putting together what I think is a pretty thorough package describing the situation. Before I let him talk about some of the technical details, I thought it might be valuable just to kind of step back a second and look at how we got here. The project that is underway is the result of our purchase of the house in 2008, which was, as the picture showed, with all the decks on it, realizing that at the time they were not particularly attractive decks and that we would like to replace them or improve them at some point in time. And then a couple of years ago, when I looked at doing some major maintenance and trying to improve them, realized that not only were they unsightly, but they were poorly constructed. We put that off for a couple of years until last year when we met with Dales and proposed essentially fixing those decks or replacing them, whatever made the most sense. And we looked at a variety, well, we basically looked to see if there were any other designs that worked on that house. And both through my own efforts and the contractor's designer, we basically came to the conclusion was that about the only thing we could do was extend the deck in the front to make it a little bit more usable, so we could set a table and move around it. And then
Which is front, east or west?
the south.
South.
Facing 50th.
Right, facing the street.
Yeah.
Excuse
I
me.
have the same problem. I don't know whether my front faces the street or the beach.
Well, yeah, right. So we basically went ahead with that plan, and Dale's put together the permit and went through the permit process and the engineering, and then things kind of started to go wrong. We found out that there was a lot of dry rot in the house, and so he hasn't told me yet, but I'm pretty sure I'm looking at a bigger bill than I thought it was to begin with.
One hurdle at a time, Don, one hurdle at a time.
So the intent all the way along has basically been to replace an existing unattractive, poorly built deck with one that would improve the appearance of the house and make the deck more usable. So it was with a fair amount of surprise that I heard that there was a lot line issue because we were putting it right back where it was. Certainly, I understand the situation and the fact that since the deck is gone, we need to treat it as a new deck. But as a homeowner, it's certainly frustrating to try to put something back the way it was in a better condition and then find out that we're not able to do that. I'll quickly state, somebody asked about egress. If you notice, all of the windows along that west side of the house all open out onto the deck that was there. And so one issue that comes up is if there is no deck there, then those can become a hazard because when they're open, there's just a screen between the floor and like a probably 10-foot drop or something. With the deck there, they could be used for egress. So with that, I will offer to answer any questions throughout this presentation, and I'll let Troy sort of present some of the details, but that's what we were trying to do. Thanks.
Questions?
The bottom of the windows for that whole west side is the floor level of the floor?
Mm-hmm. And where do the windows open? Down at the bottom?
Yes.
Not at the top?
No. The house was designed originally, and this goes to number 2, which is the variance is necessary for the preservation of the property right of the applicant. Yes, it is true, and that a city attorney will tell you that you have to have a lot and a garage on there. But that's when you're designing a lot and designing a lot or a house to fit on that lot. We inherited this problem with the house that was designed with the deck and was improperly placed on the lot. And so when we take that deck away from this house, does it function in the same way that the property owner purchased it? And realistically, it doesn't. And so it would be my recommendation that it is the property owner's right to preserve and update the property as purchased. And so I do agree with Deborah, though, that, you know, the house and the garage are on the lot. And that is kind of the criteria. But that's the criteria when you're designing a house to go on a lot. Does it meet that criteria for a single-family lot? Yes. But what if it was purchased in that way? We do have an exceptional or extraordinary circumstance. So I just kind of wanted to go through these things as we went, just one through, and kind of address them and touch on them from our point of view. If that's good for everybody. So exceptional or extraordinary circumstances apply to the property. I would state that just the fact that when we annexed this property in from the county, we annexed in exceptional and extraordinary circumstances to a certain degree. We took for word that this was built in such a way and it complied. And that's an exceptional or extraordinary circumstance. Now, one of the things that it does state is it does talk about the topography and things like that. And I do understand that certain homes are built with second-story windows and things like that, especially on the coast. There's not a flat lot on the coast. We get that. But this particular house was designed and built in a way that the deck was necessary for the function of the house and for basically an occupancy. Now, the county at that point in time did not do occupancy permits. They did not supply occupancy. They had a final inspection at the end of a job. And so this did get a final inspection, and it was approved. Kate helped me find that information, and it was approved as such. But the design of the home on the lot was designed with this deck in mind. Okay? That's why the windows open at the bottom. The egress is in conjunction with the deck. Okay? And the front door must have a deck. So some could say, well, hey, they just built a small deck with the stairs down. That gets you in the front door. But this deck was in one piece, and the age of the deck is such that it was all built at the same time. And it was built very, very poorly. I don't know if you guys have this, but I provided in our application some pictures of what the county allowed for flashing and the building of the deck, and there's some serious rot to the customer's home. So fixing the deck in place was not an option. It was also put on pier pads set in the sand. There was no concrete. There was no rebar. The thing was sinking. So replacing or updating the deck in place was just not an option for the customer. Again, exceptional circumstances. So so there's 1 and 2. I think I've hit those the best I possibly can. Number 3, the variance should not be material detrimental to the purposes of the ordinance or property in the zone, vicinity, or which the property is located. So this was one of the first houses on the street to be built back then. And so it was built. It's been there. Nobody's complained. The neighbor next door has had a chance to say, hey, you know, this is we don't want it to be built back there. They haven't. And quite frankly, when we're done building it, it's going to look pretty nice. We've talked about a cable railing and some it's AZEK decking. It's a plastic decking, which is great for fire codes. It's got a long burn time, all those types of things, and that kind of stuff. Now, something was brought up by Deborah about, you know, decks are nice, they have a view, and this and that and the other thing. This deck doesn't have a view. Okay, that other house is blocking the west view of the ocean. That's not where Don and his family sit to enjoy the ocean, okay? All they would enjoy was the neighbor's wall and their hot tub below them, okay? It's not about a view and trying to preserve the view, okay? So if we looked at the house, you can see on that side, in this area here, where the deck would come out 5 feet, there's no ocean view there, okay? We're not trying to create a really neat ocean place there. We're trying to maintain and update the house as it was purchased and originally built and originally designed to function. Okay? Number 4, the hardship is not self-imposed, and the variance request is the minimum variance that would alleviate the hardship. When we originally found out that we picked the wrong pin at the top, there was 3 pins on the lot. And so we automatically assumed, our fault, we didn't get a survey, that the one that was 5 foot off the deck was the proper one. Okay?
Gail, when you referred to pin, are you talking about a survey pin?
Yeah, rebars. And there was 3 of them up there at the top. And so we assumed that that was the correct one, and it was not. And so, you know, we put it out there, and the Planning Commission did approve our plot map at the time, and so there was, you know, ample time for us to figure that out and make sure we had the right one, okay? I agree to that. When I had very little time to get this paperwork in so we could make this meeting, and so I was kind of harried, and Kate was very, very helpful to me, and I appreciate that very, very much. The minimum, when I had a chance to talk with Deborah, we could scale back the sides of that deck and bring them closer to the house and continue that out to a point with the house. If that helps you to say that we're you know, maintaining the minimum as necessary, we're happy to do that, and it doesn't affect the way we build the deck or the look of the deck or anything like that, and it would complete the function of the house. And so I'm all for that. I didn't have an opportunity to change that or make any amendments to this just because there just simply wasn't time. I wasn't afforded the opportunity to even look at this until today when I got here. So.
What about the area on the first floor below the proposed deck?
There is no deck
There
there.
is no deck.
There's nothing
There's a
down there.
first floor deck coming out the face of the house underneath the front door, but there's none on the side. That's just a second floor deck.
If we look at the original here, this deck down here, which where's the mouse? There it is. This deck comes out towards 50th, okay, but it did not extend, it does not extend over there anymore. So it's just basically this deck that, you know, we want to rebuild as it shows there, so.
Mr. Wall, do you know your neighbors?
We have met them. The neighbors to the west in that house.
The ones that would be affected?
Yeah, they're actually, they built the house as a rental, and so we see them very seldomly. So.
Okay.
What would you say is a principal practical reason you want to build that deck?
Principal practical reason.
Yeah.
Well, so I would say that we have to kind of go back to our guidelines and to preserve the property right. And I would say that the property right would be to maintain and update the property as purchased.
What I mean is, what is the principal purpose of building that deck? What function would it serve?
Basically, can I speak to it as the owner? Basically, it will provide access to the back of the house in a more convenient fashion than having to go out through the garage and back up a hill on the other side. And it provides for safety for those windows that open from the bottom.
Is there any other way you could provide for the safety of those windows that open from the bottom without building a deck?
I guess you could put grates on them or something. I imagine you could put some sort of grating over them or something. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing that, as far as egress goes, there is egress windows on the back side of the house. There's very few. They meet the minimum requirements. And so you would be exiting a window and then scrambling down the hills on either side. This would afford the opportunity to actually get down to flat and be able to get around the house in a more functional way.
In your presentation, you stopped on item 4. Would you move on and finish up that one? The hardship does not arise from a violation of provisions of this chapter.
The hardship does not arise from the violation of the provisions of this chapter. The hardship, we all know that if we were to have just left the deck the way it was, we could have put new decking on it, we could have put a new hand railing on it, and it would be just fine, okay? But now that it's not there, all of a sudden, it's like it was never there, and I get that. But it wasn't the city's approval. It was the county's approval that allowed it to be there, and we could not let the deck stay there. The amount of rot that was behind that house, I don't know if you guys saw the pictures in the application. All around the ledger of that thing, we could not save the framing of the deck and fix the homeowner's rot problems. Besides the fact that it wasn't footed substantially enough. They actually used pre-formed pier pads on the front of a second-story deck with no shear support and no lateral support whatsoever. It was a very, very, very poorly constructed deck. And so we could not reuse it and just upgrade it as it was. There was just absolutely no way to do that. And so once we tear it down, you know, it basically functions like it was never there, even though it was part of the original design of the house that was approved for this lot. Okay? This house was designed to have a deck as such to make the house function properly. Does that make sense?
Got a question. Under item 4, it states that it's a minimum necessary. Is there a reason a 4-foot deck wouldn't?
No, it absolutely, we can bring those sides back in, and I'm more than happy to do that. I just didn't have time when I talked with Deborah the other day to have it redrawn. But we could bring it in, but it still has to be 30 inches at the point. Right here, if you look at this area of it, we still have to have a minimum of 30 inches, okay? You can't have less than 30 inches on a deck for building codes these days. And so we could bring it back at an angle to where we have to have a minimum landing size here at the top of the stairs as well, but we could angle back from here towards here and angle back from here towards here and reduce that footprint that is going into the variance by several inches on each end. And I'm happy to look at that, and if we can find a reason to allow the variance, I'm more than happy to resubmit the drawings for the deck, the permit drawings, to the planning department with a new overhead view.
I guess I think the biggest problem, of course, is the setbacks. And we've had variances come before us before, and from the same builders.
This isn't his first?
This is unfortunate. And
From the original builder, you mean?
yeah, it's not you. Don't worry.
No,
Does that count as exceptional or extraordinary?
No.
I would love to get in line should we ever find him again.
No, what I'm just saying is that setbacks are very difficult, especially when you're talking about Rhodes End and the sizes of these houses and how close they are, and whether or not your neighbors continue to rent their house or someone lives there. I mean, all those things are factors in what we have to think about, whether or not you can find other safety measures for your windows that open. We have windows in our house on the second floor that open that don't have a deck off of them, so I'm not sure.
There's a little bit difference about a slider that opens above a certain level than one that opens out this way at floor level. It's a little bit different of a concern there. And
how tall are the windows that open?
The operable
the
part?
opening.
They're 20-inch panels that slide up from the bottom. I can tell you that just as a grandfather with 6 grandkids that are going to be playing in that house, if we can't put some sort of a deck on the end of this house, then I'm going to have to replace those windows somehow. Because I know right now with the deck off, when our children go over with the grandkids, I've told them to make sure they do not open those windows because there's nothing except a screen to keep the kids from going right out onto the ground.
And there's rules as far as tempering and opening if there isn't some sort of deck. And that's why I'm saying that this house was actually designed for this deck. And so when it was approved by the county originally to go on this, as far as the property right goes, it wasn't designed just to be a single-family home with a garage on there. And I agree that even with the deck, there's a single-family home with a garage, but it was designed originally with this deck, and that's why it is the way it is. And so there's really not a ton we can do about that. And so
Thank you.
We would, as the owner, we would be more than happy if this was a 5-foot wide deck to make it 4 foot wide in order to meet this. If there was some, I've racked my brain trying to come up with, is there some way to make this work? And I can't come up with anything. I think the compromise to taper the decks on the side is fine. We could live with that. I don't know that it actually helps the situation that much. In terms of, it's still sticking over a little bit, and it would probably, I guess it would look fine either way, so.
And to Deanna, is it Deanna or Diana? Deanna? To just go back to the first part of your question about the setbacks and the aesthetics part of it. Rhodes End is a very beautiful road. It's a beautiful road with beautiful access, and it's a really neat road, and I get that. And we need to be concerned with aesthetics. And trust me, the deck that we build is going to look a whole lot better than what was originally there, if I can find the right picture here. Well, I don't see it. Anyway, the wood deck, it's going to look a whole lot better than the one that was there by tenfold, number one. And number two, since that house was built and the house next to it was built, it's been that way, and it hasn't been aesthetically unpleasing to anybody yet. Okay?
The original deck looks like it stops at the north end or the back of the house. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So now you're proposing to wrap it around the back and put stairs down?
Put stairs down to gain the access to the back.
Part of that
So
egress
that-
we're looking for.
That would not have been part of the original design.
The stairs, the ending of the deck, and then go down that way.
So how did they have access to the deck, though?
Off the front door or the steps up from highway, or from 50th Street.
There's one of the pictures that shows, I think it's picture number 5 on here. It just shows what looks like a few feet, and I don't understand how what looks like the pictures of like 12 steps going down on the back side of the house, but then on the back side of the house it looks like it's 6 feet tall. So I don't know, how the length of the length of that
Staircase?
and the height of the back of the house to the land, to the picture. I just don't see that adding up.
Yeah, this staircase, I don't think there's this many stairs here. There isn't a need for this many stairs.
That gives the impression that it's like 20 feet.
Yeah.
Whereas this picture looks like
No,
it's
it's
you could
gonna
jump
be-
out the back window and you'll be fine.
It's more like 6 feet from the deck floor down to the
So if
ground.
you could be on the back side of your house and go into the window on foot.
It'd be tough to get up into one of
There's
those
like
windows.
one window or two windows, I don't know. But
Yeah, there's 2 windows on the back, and they would be, I'm 6'3", and so they're, at this
but-
point on me,
you're not going to break your leg going out in the fire.
no. But you might have a hard time scrambling down that bank, and so having access around the house.
Questions? Thank you very much.
I appreciate your consideration.
Next, we have testimony in support of the requested variance, and I have two sign-ups for this, but I believe that was both of these gentlemen, Troy DPI and Don Wall. Are there any other, is there any other testimony in support of the variance? Is there any testimony in opposition to the variance? Do we have any testimony from representatives of public agencies? ORS Section 197-763, paragraph 6A states that upon request, the commission must either grant a continuance for no less than 7 days or hold the record open for no less than 7 days to permit any participant an opportunity to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence. Does any person who participated desire to request a continuance to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence, or request that the record be left open to submit additional written testimony, argument, or evidence? Thank you. Is there a motion to close the public hearing and the record?
I move to close the public hearing and close the record.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Does the applicant waive the opportunity to submit final written argument after the close of the record is provided in ORS Section 197-763, paragraph 6E? Thank you. Does the city attorney or staff have any comments concerning legal issues raised during these proceedings, instructions on the applicable law, or legal advice concerning the application of the law to the evidence in the record? No. This matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral decision.
I actually was going to say something. I don't really need to belabor the point because staff.
I'm sorry, sir.
I can't hear you.
Is this working?
Yes.
Okay. Staff did correctly point out that in the past I have read from a LUBA opinion about the code requirement and the issue of a property right, and they did correctly point out that the cases talk about that authorizes a variance only when necessary to establish a use allowed by the applicable zoning regulations, as opposed to a desire to have a deck. In addition to that, the issue of, there was a self-created issue. In this case, the deck has been removed, so you can have a self-created hardship based upon the personal desires of the applicant. In this case, the personal desires of the applicant is to rebuild the deck. It is not a situation where you have a legal nonconformity. They referenced the right to restore it to the way it was when they bought it. Well, if it was a legal nonconforming use, that is, it was constructed in accordance with the law in effect at the time, then you would have a right to maintain it as a legal nonconformity. The law, in this case, did not change. It was constructed in violation of the code, as staff has pointed out. They purchased it with that violation. That's why when you buy property, there's a warning that says go to the local planning department to ascertain what the uses are that are permitted and what the local zoning code requires. So that self-created issue may also, just saying I inherited it is not really a defense. It's not there now. They want to rebuild it in violation of the setback, and it was not a legal nonconformity, and one of the county requirements apparently is that it not be a violation. So in addition to that, as was mentioned, it's not necessary to maintain a property right. If you have any questions, I'm here if you want to ask.
On that item 5, I'd like a little advice on how we ought to interpret that as a planning commission that doesn't have this rule. The hardship does not arise from a violation of the provisions of this chapter, and your note is, Deborah's note is, this criterion is from the county code. The city
Speak into your microphone, please.
does not have a similar criteria.
Yes, well,
Does that essentially mean we ought to just ignore that paragraph?
no. If it was constructed in violation of the code, if the county didn't go out and inspect, it doesn't excuse a noncompliance. It just wasn't discovered. So there's no estoppel based upon a failure to cite. Just because the county didn't call them out on it doesn't mean that it's unenforceable. I think that the staff report pretty much says that it was constructed in violation of the code.
Gentlemen, let's hear some opinions and feelings about this.
You have something.
Sorry?
They want to say something, but
No. The hearing is closed, I'm sorry.
When I ask everybody to remember to speak into the microphones, 'cause unfortunately, you have to get right up by them.
I don't see how the variance ordinance permits us to approve this request. I think the variance is not necessary for the preservation of a property right, and there are alternatives to dealing with the problem of not having a deck out there, and that one of them was mentioned by the applicant, is changing the nature of the windows, for example. So, we have to meet all 4 of those criteria, and I think at least 2 of them, it doesn't meet it.
I'm kind of going the other way. I feel that there's a door that's there now into the house that's off that deck.
There's no door off the deck.
it's the front door.
Front door.
Correct.
Front door's on the south side facing the street. There are no doors facing west.
This deck is on the west side?
Deck is on, they
Yes.
propose it to be on the southwest with stairs going on the north going east.
Okay.
The deck's on the west. The big neighbor house is on.
Speak into your microphone.
Yeah, the deck is on the west.
But still, they're trying to rebuild it according to what was there before, with their understanding that it was in the proper rules applied at the time. Is that correct? Am I not correct?
I believe that that's what the testimony was. Yes.
So again, I'm there to let them.
Is that an ignorance of the law or?
I wouldn't call it.
Doug, would you
ignorance of the
speak
law.
into your microphone, too?
I wouldn't call it ignorance of the law. I would just say it's, you can't be responsible for every nuance of a law that's out there. You just can't see them all. That's like, not looking both ways when you cross an intersection, that some things are just there naturally. But in this situation, I think they were under the assumption, and rightly so, because there was nothing out there warning them that this was going to be wrong. There was a problem. They have rot. They have to repair the dry rot. That's just kind of obvious. That's structural. And so I don't have a problem with them putting or granting them a variance to rebuild this deck.
I wouldn't call it, I'll just use the word unfortunate, because I can see how they would think that this was appropriate, because it was there when Mr. Wall purchased the home. And but I am a firm believer in setbacks, and this is a real tough one.
But this wouldn't be the first one that we've had come before us that we, and we don't grant them all. And I think this one does have its case for proper observations to have a variance. I do believe it'll be a hardship to the property itself, and I'll stand by that.
Deborah, at the 30 inches, is that still a violation of the setback?
Yes.
But if that's just at the point,
Just at the minimum, that's the minimum, is that true, that that's the minimum required for a deck space?
We don't have any rule that says that. The applicant on the phone had said to me that he thought there was some kind of a standard that said 2.5 feet was the minimum. I'm not aware of that. And
How much of a violation at 30 inches is it still? Would it need to be to not, what would the width need to be in order to be following the setback?
okay, let's go. At the south end, we have a setback of a total of 8 feet 4 inches. At the north end, we have 8 feet 10 inches, because the house was built a little askew. So I would say in the middle, we probably have a setback of 8 feet 7 inches, which would be half of the difference.
Even though it comes out?
Well, and then it doesn't matter because the deck that they showed in their drawing is straight
you're saying
across.
the angle of that, okay.
Just the distance from the point to the property line would be 8 feet 7 inches. So if you were going to have a 30-inch deck, 2.5 feet, then basically you'd be down to 4 feet.
So
No,
it-
6, I'm sorry. I'm not saying that right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so,
can I ask this question while you're?
oh, no, oh, that's right. I forgot to factor in the point,
Right.
the angle. So, yeah.
So if the width were 4 feet instead of 5 feet, then
Width of the deck or the width
deck.
of the setback? Okay.
the deck.
From the landscaping plan, which sheet is that, number 2, it says 3'10" with a 5-foot deck. So if you go 4-foot deck, that would give you 4 foot 10 inches. So it would need to be 3 foot 10 inches at the north side in order to maintain this accurate setback, correct?
Right.
And then following that down, whatever that point is, it's, I don't know, but you figure.
There would be a need for a variance there for sure in order to get 2.5 feet.
Even with the 2.5 feet, that would need a variance at the point there?
Yes.
So what
That right, Troy?
wouldn't need a variance? It could be a foot, would that?
It would need to be like a foot 10 inches at the point.
Was- About 20,
So a
20
deck could.
inches, 22 inches.
So a deck could be built there that would be in compliance with a setback?
Not at the point.
Not at the point.
Okay, ever at the point?
Well, all you would get is 1.5 feet essentially at the point.
But enough to squeeze by.
Enough to put a potted plant there and have it grow.
The, I would suggest that maybe you go through and decide whether you can grant a variance, and then you can talk, if you decide you can grant a variance, then you would need to talk about how much of a variance. But I think the first step is to decide whether or not
So it's,
meets the criteria.
if they've, I'm sorry. The first step is to see if they apply to all those. And then
Right.
if they do, then if there will be conditions.
Right.
If we don't find that they followed those, it's a no, and there will not be a variance with conditions.
Right.
Okay.
When I do findings for this, regardless of your decision, I would like to be able to say what the commission decided on each one of those criteria, so that I can call that out in the findings.
Well, then I'll move that we go ahead and recommend to the council that we grant this variance, and that we, at some point later here, talk about what degree of the variance we need. So I think I worded that correctly. So I'm looking for a second.
Mr. Avicello, this goes to council.
No.
This is your
ju-
decision.
This is state, this is us.
There's a possible appeal to council, but this is your decision.
Okay, well, I move in this issue that we grant the variance to this applicant to have a variance on the deck that he's constructing or wishes to reconstruct to correct an issue that they have with dry rot.
Suggesting that.
So how are you going to relate to, we have a duty to deny this if any one of those four, if any one of those four do not apply?
We had a duty to apply.
Please speak in your microphones.
If any one of those four does not apply, sorry. That's the duty. We have to decide on the applicability of the four criteria
Okay, so
before we can.
number 5, I think, is met. They have a hardship. I don't believe it was self-imposed. I don't believe they did it intentionally. And I think we are preserving the right of the property.
Let me ask again, does the hardship arise from a violation of the provisions of the chapter?
Of the chapter?
The chapter being, what is the?
The Lincoln
Hold on, let me
County
scroll
Code.
up.
The county code.
County Code, Section 1768-020, identifies 7 circumstances that must exist to grant a variance. My biggest concern about the whole thing is the hardship does arise from a violation of the provisions of that county code.
I don't think the hardship arises from the code,
From the violation,
from the
from the
violation.
violation
That
of the
occurred at the
provisions
time.
of the code.
That occurred at the original time of construction.
I mean, as I said before, I think there are alternatives to solving the problem. So at least 2 of those criteria are not met.
So I'd
And
like
the
to-
other one, it doesn't create, it's not necessary for the protection of a property right.
So you believe, is that number 2? 2 and 5 have not been met.
I don't think number 1 has been met. It's an exceptional circumstance, and I don't think number 2 has been met either. Yeah.
And 4 as well. It's not the minimum necessary.
Right.
Steve, I don't think we're in the business of proposing solutions if we're constrained by the,
We're
by our
constrained by
duty.
the ordinance.
By the ordinance,
Right, to approve or deny.
yeah.
Right.
But I believe we can view into it, we can read into it the way that we want to read into it, that it is their right to rebuild something the way they perceived it as when they purchased the property.
That's not part of the ordinance.
That, to me, is not a criteria for me. I'm not looking at the ordinance, I'm looking what's right and what's wrong. I'm using the criteria as a guideline, but in this situation, I have to make a value judgment, and my value judgment says it's detrimental to the property. They have the right to rebuild that deck. If we conform it into a smaller deck that meets code, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But I do believe they have the right, since it was there before, to rebuild that deck. It's not a self-imposed hardship.
No, I don't think it's a self-imposed hardship either. But I believe it does arise from a violation of the code.
The code at the time the house was built?
Right.
So what about, the old adage, two wrongs don't make a right. And I know we can apply that here, and we can come to the conclusion you have. But on the other hand, if the county failed to follow its due diligence at that time, and they granted the property owners at that time use of the property and meeting code, then I think the county has already set a precedence and saying it meets code.
Deanna, what do you think?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Amber, did you have something?
Well, I was just going to ask if our city attorney would like to respond to that, about the obligation of the city planning staff, or the county planning staff, to go out and check foundation footing setbacks. I don't believe that's a requirement, is it?
I believe I've already answered this and addressed it. Obviously, the failure of the county staff to enforce does not bind the city or stop the city from enforcing the provisions of the code.
But we had the same situation with the property up in Southwest Coast where we did not take into consideration at that time that somebody could go backfill a property and overbuild it to the extent where they are changing the elevation on their property. And we got into a whole heck of a lot of problems on that one. And we had to go ahead and legalistic, after the house was finalized and the review was finalized and they were given an occupancy permit, we had to go back and see if we can get that reversed, and we couldn't. But that was our mistake, a part of the city's mistake, in not catching that beforehand. So, if the due diligence isn't done by the county, and what good is having a code if the county's not going to go out there and make sure that everybody follows the code to the letter? That's the county's mistake. I can't see us going back in hindsight and saying, oh, well, the county did it wrong now, and now we have to hold everybody responsible for the county's mistake. I can't see it.
Well, I would have to, add to what the city attorney said, that the county staff approved a 5-foot side yard, which is correct. The contractor at the time did not build it according to the approved plans. And so if there is a violation or a responsibility there, it is on the contractor at the time in 2005, not on the county staff. That would be my interpretation of.
So you wouldn't think the county is responsible to make sure that the building standards are held to code?
They were when they approved the plans. And then I believe it's the job of the contractor to build according to the approved plans.
And it's not the problem of the county when it goes out there to give them occupancy to do their due diligence and make sure everything is built up to code. Because I see it a lot of times where, the municipality will come back with a list and say, okay, you need to raise that handrail up 4 inches because it's under code. And the county could have come back and said, you need to cut back that deck because it's not in compliance with the code. But the county failed to do that, correct? The county didn't.
far as
the
I
coun-
know,
The
yes.
county didn't verify its information that they had. So I see the county as being at fault, not the homeowner.
There's a similar precedence, though, that came up a while back of a house that was built 3 inches too tall.
I was referring to that one.
Yes. Well, we told them to lower the roof.
Yeah. That wasn't the one. This one.
We
was-
didn't use the wording, but
Yeah.
that,
I'd make a motion. I'd like to motion to deny the variance request.
Second.
Kate, would you call the roll, please?
Griffiths,
So tell me, a vote to deny is yes?
Yes.
your motion is to deny, so.
Okay, yes.
Bryson,
No.
Cunningham,
Yes.
Hinton,
No.
Hoagland,
Yes.
Robinson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
I remind you that the planning commission rules require the no votes to explain their vote.
Yes, please.
Well, I'll just back up to the plate and say the county failed to catch this the first time around, and I think the county's at fault for letting the property be developed the way it was, and the present homeowner should have the right to rebuild the deck the way that the county saw it was correct in the first place.
Deanna?
And my no vote was because I felt that we could approve the variance with condition, and that the condition could be a smaller width of a deck and not encroach as much into the other property, or closer to it.
Planning staff will bring back written findings and a final order for adoption at the next regular meeting.
Could I mention that the applicant does have a right to appeal? And does anybody on the other side there have any, like, time limits or anything like that, that you can explain to the applicant or public?
Well, so at the next meeting, they'll adopt a final order, and then we'll send a notice out of the decision, and there's a 10-day appeal period after that. And if it is appealed, then it goes to city council.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to call for a short break before we move on to the next item.
pretty soon.
Don't have ambient.
They are if you're right into it.
Okay, the microphones are on.
Thank you.
Mine.
Yeah, because
All right, we're back. It is now 7:54 PM. Let's just make sure I'm in the right place here. Whoops, I got the wrong one, sorry. You know, I have 3 for 2016-02.
On this script, I see a typo in the first line where you say the public hearing for CPA and ZC 2016-02 is open. It's actually 05.
Thank you. That's what was confusing me. All right, now it's 7:55, and the public hearing for file CPA and ZC 2016-05 is now open. This public hearing concerns owner initiated proposal to rezone 2 tax lots from high-density residential, multiple-family residential to general commercial GC. The subject property is 2020 Northeast 22nd Street in the Ocean Lake neighborhood. The applicants and property owners are Michael and Lila Bradley. The Planning Commission's role in this process is to consider any written or oral comments or testimony, as well as information from staff, and make a recommendation to the City Council, who will hold an additional public hearing. City Council may adopt the Planning Commission recommendation, may adopt a different recommendation, or take other action. The Commission must take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the Commission wish to declare an ex parte contact, conflict of interest, or bias in this matter? No. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the qualifications of a commissioner to participate in this matter? No. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to consider this matter? No. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to the City Code in ORS 197.763.5. Staff will now read a list of the applicable substantive criteria for this decision.
The substantive criteria for this decision include the statewide planning goals and the comprehensive plan goals,
Thank you.
and the applicable provisions of the zoning ordinance.
I should have called you on that.
Just didn't seem like enough, did it?
It just didn't seem like enough. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable substantive criteria previously listed, or such other criteria in the plan or land use regulations which the person believes applies to this decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the decision maker to respond to the issue precludes any action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the end of this hearing, any person who participated may request a continuance to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence, or request that the record be left open to submit additional written testimony, argument, or evidence. Before the staff presents a report, I'd like to summarize the adopted public hearing procedures. A brochure outlining these is at the entrance to the council chambers. Generally, the order of proceedings will be preliminary matters, required statements, staff report, questions of staff, applicant's presentation, in favor of the application, opposed to the application, rebuttal by applicant, requests of continuances or to leave the record open, close of the hearing, close of the record, request to submit written argument, declaration, deliberations, and recommendation. The city has established some time limits. The applicant will have 15 minutes and may reserve up to 5 minutes of that time for rebuttal. After the applicant testifies, any person may speak for up to 3 minutes. If the Planning Commission has questions, your time responding to any questions will not be counted in your time limit. If you wish to speak, please write your name and mailing address clearly on the sign-up list at the entrance. Please speak directly into the microphone and begin by stating your name. If you also have written testimony to submit into the record, please provide a copy to the recorder. Please present the staff report.
Thank you. All right, first thing I want to show you in the Bradley proposed rezoning is the zoning map for the area. You can see on the map that the subject property is RM, that's the dark brown. It has neighboring use and zoning of commercial, general commercial along the highway and including Ace Hardware directly north. And on the south and east is park zoning. Park zoning includes the community center to the south, and Kurtz's Park is kitty corner to the northeast. This is an aerial photo, and you can see from the aerial photo the surrounding land uses. I'll give you a little bit of background here. The Bradleys recently purchased the property from the Elks Club. According to the application, the Elks acquired title of the land from the city of Ocean Lake in 1953. The city of Ocean Lake had acquired title by deed for the Elks and the entire block from A.C. Kurtz's. I assume that's where Kurtz's Park got its name. The Elks built the building in 1953 and shared the parking lot with the city until the Elks ceased using the building in the summer of 2015. Staff considers this a minor qualitative change in the character of the land use with no significant impact on traffic or surrounding land uses. In the code, there is a distinction between a major land use or a major change and a minor change. Because we consider it to be minor change, then we use a certain criteria that is not as complicated. And we use a quasi-judicial criterion. So, no, I have to take that back because this is rezoning, not variance. So, anyway, the applicant states that the owner will use the building to host events and provide a venue similar to the function in the past. But I do want to remind you, as I always do with rezonings, that once the property is rezoned to general commercial, that means that any use permitted in that zone would be allowed without further action by this board or the city council. The lot allows little room for increased building coverage, but it could accommodate additional use with vertical expansion, although the proposed comprehensive plan and zoning maps could result in a change. Parking is limited and shared with the community center, and basically the parking is all on the city's lot. You can see the lot lines here on this parcel. There are two parcels that comprise the Elks property, or now the Bradley property, excuse me, and then this large lot is part of the community center. So they are limited somewhat in how much they could add to the current uses of the site. The application statements are not binding, as I said, so if they decided to change the use after rezoning, they could change it to anything that's permitted in the GC zone, or if they wanted to do a conditional use, then it would have to come back to you and the council. All right, so I have gone through in your materials and addressed each of the comprehensive plan goals and with findings, proposed findings, and I've also addressed each of the statewide planning goals with findings. So I am not going to repeat them. I have listed them here, so if you see something that you want me to talk about, let me know. I have called out number 6, which is the housing goal. And because the RM is basically a housing zone, and we would be changing that to basically a commercial zone. I did get an email from our Department of Land Conservation and Development representative. That's our state agency that oversees planning in the state. And he was questioning why, with the shortage of housing that we do have, especially affordable housing, why we would be changing, rezoning anything from multifamily. So that's why I'm going to give you a little more background on that one. The proposed rezoning would convert 32,000 square feet from multifamily residential to the GC zone, and so that's about 3/4 of an acre. The GC zone, I pointed out to him, and I'm pointing out to you, also permits residential as well as commercial and mixed uses. This property has not provided multifamily housing in the past. Instead, the existing building has accommodated retail and services. Based on the lot area required per unit in the RM zone, the property could accommodate, if it was redeveloped, up to 20 units of housing. Following the proposed rezoning, the subject property could also accommodate 20 units as a conditional use. We do allow multifamily as a conditional use in the GC zone, so the same availability would apply, and it also could accommodate some multifamily apartments with additional stories or renovations in a mixed-use building. And that is a permitted use. So we're not necessarily excluding housing by this zoning change. The 2006 buildable lands inventory found at the time that vacant parcels zoned RM totaled almost 90 acres, of which 56 acres were buildable and 33 were wetlands or something else was wrong with them, so they were really feasible for multifamily construction. The study called for an increase in the amount of multifamily residential between 21 and 50 acres, it said, to meet the 2025 need. In 2010, the city rezoned a large portion of the area that is just west of West Devils Lake Road, and that had been annexed to the city in the past but had never been rezoned. And so in 2010, the city did a rezoning and changed 34 vacant acres that were R1A to RM. So we did substantially address that that increase in land zone for RM at that time.
Were all 34 of those acres buildable?
I believe so.
Thank you.
Don't know for sure. A quick GIS analysis that I asked Sandy Gruber to do for us of the vacant RM land within the city limits today finds 134 acres, subtracting 33 that were unbuildable in 2006. The total buildable, I'm assuming, land would be 100 acres, but we could find that some of those are not buildable, depending on the status of those that we annexed in 2010, or rezoned in 2010.
What was the recommended number of acres again?
Well, what I saw was that it recommended adding between 21 and 50 acres to the amount totaling the 90 acres that we already had.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, okay. I'm not finished with that one yet. The 2006 buildable lands inventory also called for an addition of mixed-use zoning and to the code, and we have done that in several zones. And since 2006, the city's also increased the opportunities for multifamily housing by allowing mixed use, mixed residential and commercial in zones that were formerly only allowed commercial use. And we also require planned unit developments now for any development that is over 2 acres or 10 units. And by allowing and encouraging planned unit developments, we allow for a mix of uses that would include or could include multifamily. So we're a lot more flexible than we used to be. And so, you know, in the planned unit developments, we allow flexibility to cluster units in multifamily buildings. So I did copy here, I did send the staff report to our DLCD representative, and he said, thank you so much for forwarding your staff report. And he complimented me on its organizational structure. And then he said, you have addressed the department's original concerns regarding the need to provide adequate findings associated with needed housing in Lincoln City. We appreciate the opportunity to work with you on this application. Any questions about housing? Yes.
Where the property's located, and if it goes to general commercial, what's the height restrictions on it if they were to build, for instance, something different like a apartment complex?
Well, let's see, I believe height in a general commercial zone is 45 feet.
So
And so right now, I'm not sure how tall the structure is. It's probably, maybe the applicants can tell you, give you an idea of that.
what I was going to go at is when you made your estimate of how much land could be used under different conditions, under RM, it can only go to 35 feet,
Yes, that's true.
but under general commercial, it could go 45, so you could add another floor to any kind of an apartment complex and build a higher density unit.
That's true.
Thank
Good
you.
point.
Limited, of course, by parking. Limited, of course, by parking requirements,
Underground parking.
Right.
then limited by money.
Rooftop, rooftop parking, yeah.
Rooftop parking.
All right, shall I go on?
Go ahead.
Okay, so let's see. Then, to continue on with the comprehensive plan goals, we have goals on economy, aesthetics, transportation. I will mention that this is within about 160 feet of Highway 101, which is our primary arterial and moves more traffic than any other street in the community. 22nd Street, which is adjacent to the north side of the property, is a collector street. And so again, it is designed to function, to move a lot of traffic. And the other goals that I've addressed in your materials are energy, overall environmental goals, and then the shoreland, beaches, dunes, and estuary and ocean, which don't really apply to this property. Here's a couple photographs of the site. This is taking a look west across the front of the property. Statewide planning goals. As you probably have noticed in the past, these are pretty close in nature to the ones in the comprehensive plan. They're a little bit different, so we do address both. A lot of times we just refer to the findings of the first mentioned rather than repeating it all. But again, you know, we have citizen involvement, land use planning are always the first two. And because of the way that we have structured our comprehensive plan and had approvals of that, and then the efforts that we make, which I think are really substantial in trying to get word about zoning changes out to the public through the newspaper, through individual mailings, and also on our website, and we make all the information available. And staff is there to help explain it if necessary. Agricultural lands and forest lands, this is inside the urban growth boundaries, so those don't apply. Natural resources, we don't have any on the site. We don't have any scenic, historic, or open spaces on the site. Air, water, and land resources, areas subject to natural hazards, not necessarily pertinent here. One thing that we didn't mention in the comprehensive plan goals that are in the statewide goals are the recreational needs. to satisfy the recreational needs of citizens of the state. And I'll just mention here that the former use and of this facility was primarily for recreation and services such as restaurant. And the application says that they're going to continue that. The proposed rezoning would allow eating and drinking establishments, community meeting buildings, fraternal or social organizations, physical fitness centers, and as permitted uses, and indoor commercial recreation as a conditional use. So I see that as being consistent with this goal. Here's another view. Speaking of recreational uses, here is the city's recreation center right there in close proximity to this building. And that's the other side of the building, and with the community center in the back. And the jointly used parking lot. Continuing on with the statewide planning goals, economic, housing, basically the same findings for the comprehensive plan, public facilities and services, transportation, energy conservation, urbanization, the Willamette River, which is not close, estuarine resources, and then all our coastal beaches and dunes and ocean. So unless anybody has any questions or wants any clarification on those findings, I will go on. I will say that I did not see any issues with inconsistency of this proposal to any of our comprehensive plan or statewide planning goals. So here we are at the recommendation. The staff recommends that you hold a public hearing on the proposed rezoning to general commercial, and if evidence warrants, recommend the rezoning to the city council. And that's my report.
Thank you. Any questions? Questions?
Yes. Oh. I believe it came up the last time we saw this, and that southeast corner not being in the property of the Bradleys, and that being in the parks, and the southwest having part of that. So is there something to manage that, or?
Well, there is a land swap in the works, and I think the applicants can say more about that. But, you know, it does bring up an interesting point. So if we are rezoning these two parcels right now, and then they swap, then there will be some, some overlap there, where maybe some of their land will still be park, and some of the city's land will be general commercial. It's going to be an insignificant amount of land, but it's something that we may, if timing is right, we can maybe clean it up at the council level.
The recommendation would be to sync the proposals so that they are at least done contemporaneously, so the land exchange and the rezonings are processed concurrently to the extent they can be, to make sure that you don't have to go back and clean this up later.
I would hope so. Thank you. That to me is significant. I think the land needs to be clear, so to speak, in order to rezone it for the use of the building. And in addition to that, the last time we were talking about this, there was a request for an agreement with the city for parking. Do you know if that's been accomplished?
That is moving ahead also, and the Bradleys can speak to that, exactly where that is in the process.
Are we then premature today?
Well, I think that the Bradleys are proposing a redesign of the parking lot. I mean, they could have their rezoning and go ahead with the use, but
They're rezoning the city's parking lot?
no, they could have the rezoning of the building, and go ahead with their renovations and use, but to the extent that almost all the parking is on the city's property, they need to work with the city to reach that agreement. Also, they are going to be going through the site plan review process, and that is the process that I use to count parking spaces and make sure that there are adequate spaces for the types of use in both of the buildings.
I mean,
Just
eight parking spaces for 32,000 square feet doesn't seem right.
No, and they never were limited to that. The Elks and the city always shared parking.
Right. I remember there was something in a notes in a meeting, city council meeting, but.
And I think that Bradley's can probably explain all these various things they have in the works right now in order to get this accomplished. But, in terms of whether they have adequate parking, that is something that I will address in the site plan review, and we could limit with conditions the uses if we felt that there wasn't enough parking to meet our standards in the zoning ordinance.
What are the standards for a building of that type and size?
It really depends on the uses. For retail, for instance, it's 1 per 400 square feet. For restaurants, it has to do with the number of seating. For audit.
So if it seats 300, then they have to have 300 parking spaces?
No, it isn't 1-to-1. And I could go to our zoning ordinance and show you the list, but every single use has there are many uses that are spelled out in 1756 and under number of parking spaces and then a standard for each use. So we need to know in the building exactly what we're talking about for uses, and then figuring out the square feet for each of those and the number of required parking.
Which is not what we're doing right now.
No, we're not.
No, but the parking really isn't relevant to this request tonight, because this is just changing from multifamily to general commercial, and there may not be a restaurant on that site. The Bradleys could decide to use it for another commercial purpose, right?
Well, that's true. Yes.
Deb, any other questions? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Mr.
I
Apicella.
just want to reiterate that, again, this is not a site plan review. So we're really just approving the uses of the property. Site planning will come later.
Thank you. Could we have the applicant's presentation, please?
Try to put it on.
That picture is probably the most useful.
There.
No, the aerial view.
The red and green one,
Oh, the zoning.
right there. Thank you.
Okay, that sounds good.
Or the next one.
It's like your head.
That's fine.
Which one would you like?
That one.
That one?
Hello again.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Lila Bradley. This is my husband.
Mike Bradley.
Welcome.
Thank you. So what we've done actually was, at your recommendation, we were going to wait for the comprehensive plan update to see if the city was going to rezone this, to the correct use that it's been used for all these years. And that looked like it was going to take quite a while, so we decided to go ahead and ask for the rezoning of the building. And in the meantime, we have done a legal description for the property exchange, as you suggested, and so we'll be turning that into the city. We started a site plan review for the parking lot. We have added approximately 135 spaces. We've redesigned the entire parking lot, and so we've been able to add the spaces. We were told by the planning department 90 spaces would be needed originally, and so we have all of that criteria in the site plan review right now, and that will be, I believe they're going to hold that on October 20th. So this was, our first step was to get it rezoned correctly, and then the property exchange was going to be part of the parking lot agreement, which we have written up and will be submitted this week to the city manager. So this was just the first step of getting things correct with the property.
Did you have your parking lot redesign was to the east of it?
Yeah, actually, it's for the entire parking lot, and so it's for in front of the community center as well. And that was really what we thought was asked of us. So we had a designer redesign that parking lot, and so that's what will be a site plan review. We've already submitted that.
Just curious how many more spaces it would be.
135.
More than what it is.
More than what it is.
Yeah.
It's an impressive redesign. It's safer. The traffic flow is better. It changes the parking configuration in front of the community center so people aren't backing out into the travel lanes. And so it takes care of fire trucks. They're 24-foot lanes throughout the entire, and it's pretty close. The main travel lanes are pretty close to what they are now, but just the refiguration of the way people are parked. You know, I don't think it was ever really designed, you know, essentially. And so it's a great design.
Other questions?
Is that, do you have to have a compact car in order to fit into the spaces? I'm just trying to
No.
see 134 more spaces.
You know, I didn't think I was going to talk about this too much tonight, and so, but we had all of the criteria that we have submitted, and so it's per seat, you know, and the community center requirement was 116 spaces, and I think we're up to 235. And only, if I remember correctly, about 21% is compact, and all the compact are in the far sides of that whole outline of the parking lot and not into the center of the parking lot, so they're all normal size spaces, plus they add 8, I believe, ADA spaces with aisles, and also aisleways, so that you're able to go down a 9-foot center area and get over to the sidewalk, and then also the other ADA parking spots would be against the sidewalk. And so they wouldn't have to go so far to get undercover and get into the community center. So it's a really well laid out design.
I know you weren't planning to talk about this, but this was something we were very interested in the last
Right,
piece, and I appreciate you taking the time to
It was kind of a
fill us in on it.
three-step, you know, process. It's a little
It's
complicated.
complex.
So we wanted to at least get the general commercial zoning instead of multifamily, and then we have the exact lot line. So after this, if you approve this going forward to the council tonight, and then we already have this parking plan it's submitted and on the books in the planning department, then the last thing we would do is the lot line agreement and or the lot line exchange and the parking lot agreement.
Great.
So we have that drafted, but it needs to go to the city manager and city attorney review.
I guess I was hoping that those other 2 pieces would be done before you came back to us.
They are all hinged together. It's just kind of a process of making them all work.
Yeah, I see that point too, and it's kind of, I kind of feel like we're doing this piecemeal, you know, because we've already granted the one variance for the corner of the property, which makes sense, but it would have been nice to have everything all on one plate instead of having a little piece here, a little piece there, so we could see the whole big picture, not just, you know, little plates by little plates.
Right, and that's what we were going to present to to actually the city council. We were going to do the zoning, and the zoning goes on to city council, and that was going to go with the parking agreement and the site plan review, and so they would be looking at that whole picture, which is what I gathered from the planning commission last time we met.
Yeah, but I remember we talked about the variance that we granted for the corner of the building. We also got into discussion of what the purpose of the property was going to be, what we were going to be looking at when it came to the parking, and how we were going to correlate that to what takes place in the future. So, yeah, it's not a problem to work with it this way. It's just kind of, just getting little pieces, not the whole plate.
The zone change, we had to come back to the planning commission for the, the first part of the zone change, and then it moves on to council if you approve it. So we were looking for that step tonight so it could go to council and they could look at the entire package.
I think I remember we were always going to get the zone change sometime in the future.
Yeah. I understood that.
I agree. I'd really like to have had it all in one nice little clean bundle, but sometimes things don't work that way.
Well, just for clarity, a land exchange wouldn't come to you. So you have to go first. You have to get this recommendation to council so it can catch up with everything else.
Are there any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're at testimony in support of the application. Joe, are you opposed? Okay. Others, including any testimony from representatives of public agencies or rebuttal, no. ORS section 197.763, excuse me, paragraph 6A states that upon request, the commission must either grant a continuance for no less than 7 days or hold the record open for no less than 7 days to permit any participant opportunity to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence. Does any participant who participated desire, does any person who participated desire to request, my throat is going here, a continuance to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence? Thank you. Is there any way we could just read this once and stipulate that it's been read?
You can always ask me to read it.
Now he tells me. I've got one sentence left. Does any person who participated desire to request a continuance to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence, or request that the record be left open to submit additional same? No. Is there a motion to close the public hearing and the record?
I move to close the public hearing and the record.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Excuse me, one more thing. Does the applicant waive the opportunity to submit final written argument after the close of the record as provided in ORS section 197.763, paragraph 6E? Do you want to waive? Yes. No,
Yes.
not coaching, but that's... Does the city attorney or staff have any comments concerning legal issues raised during these proceedings, instructions on the applicable law, or legal advice concerning the application of the law, the evidence, and the record?
I really don't have anything. I think Deb covered the housing issue that was the concern of the department, so if you have any questions, I'll try to help them.
Thank you. Staff?
I don't have anything else, thank you.
Thank you. This matter is returned to the table for deliberations and recommendation.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I move that we recommend to the City Council that it amend the comprehensive plan map and zoning map to redesignate the subject property by adopting appropriate ordinances.
Second.
Kate?
Cunningham,
Yes.
Hoagland,
Yes.
Griffiths,
Yes.
Bryson,
Yes.
Hinton,
Yes.
and Robinson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Let's see. I think I've lost my place here. When will this be heard by the city council?
October 10th.
This will be heard by city council October 10th. Thank you. Okay. Old business, unscheduled new business.
Just one thing, I wanted to briefly describe or talk about something that we're looking at. The last couple of meetings here at the Planning Commission has been concerned about the building permit process. And I've been talking with the city manager about it, and we have come up with a system where, or I guess a plan where next month, we're going to set up some meetings next month with a number of builders in town. In fact, what we did was develop a list of the 20 builders who do the most building, get the most permits in the town. And we'll have 3 or 4 meetings with 4 or 5 of them at a time to go over what their concerns and issues are, and see what might need to be done to improve our process and our function in general in terms of handling building permits. And they will be meetings that you all are certainly welcome to attend, preferably not more than 3 of you at a time, so it's not a public meeting we need to give notice in the newspaper of and that kind of thing. But certainly it'd be open to the public, and you'd be welcome to be there.
Can I ask you a question? Did you follow up on the possibility of impact fees being different for the value of the properties, or did you look at that at all?
Not sure what.
It's not impact fees. I know that's the wrong term.
System development charges?
Yes, that.
That's really separate from the building permit process. For different kinds of properties, like for commercial versus residential, the impact fees or the system development charges are different. And I think that all in all, there may be some more analysis is needed in general of how.
Yeah, my goal, of course, would be to get a lower fee for a cheaper house.
Yeah, smaller house or whatever. Yeah, and there's merit in that, and there's I've discussed that a lot with our consultant who helps us set the system development charges, and also with Public Works and so on. There's arguments both sides on that, and so that's an ongoing discussion right now. But as I say, that's different from the building permit process itself on how we intake them, process them, and issue them, and then inspect and so on. So.
You'll let us know when those happen, and we can,
Yes, absolutely.
we can discuss which of us can attend to avoid a quorum.
Would it be appropriate to have a committee of the Planning Commission who could go to those, so that they would hear?
If you want, certainly that would be fine. If you want to designate 1 or 2 or 3 of you to go, that would be. Or you could all go to different meetings.
Yeah, I think it might make more sense to all go to different meetings and maybe have a sign-up sheet for them, so we don't have 4 people there.
Right.
As we develop the times, I'll bring it back to you, and you can decide who goes to what.
Thank you.
Okay.
Reports and comments, Community Development Director.
I have nothing, well, actually, just one thing. I'll let you know that we're just, 2 weeks away from having a new person in the office to be handling our VRD processing, so she'll start in about 2 weeks.
I saw the job description. It looks like a lot bigger job than code enforcement. You're going to be asking a lot from this person.
Yeah, it's an intense job.
It is.
I do have something. I would just like to mention that, and may I need a little help here. Next Monday, we have a meeting of our economic opportunity analysis, housing needs, and buildable lands inventory. Isn't that right?
It's on Tuesday.
Tuesday. Okay, Tuesday afternoon from, I believe, 3 to 5.
2 to 5.
2 to 5, thank you.
Are we invited?
It's open to the public.
Yeah.
As long as not more than 3 of us show up.
That is true. It's true.
I'll come in disguise.
In your Halloween costume.
But I believe it will be broadcast also and streamed, so you'll be able to see what happens.
Is that it, Deborah?
Did you want to announce the Spyglass tour?
Oh, yeah, sure. Tomorrow, we are having a park board meeting, and before the park board meeting starts at 4 o'clock, we are going to do a tour of the Spyglass Ridge Spyglass Open Space. We have been conducting a thinning project in the open space over starting last fall, and we finished up this summer. The city forest, the man who's been the consulting forester for the city, Mark Miller of Trout Mountain Forestry, will be here, and he is the person who oversaw that project and will be taking us on a tour. We're going to be starting at the south end of the open space, which is accessible from southeast Lee, and that's in the Bayview subdivision area. So we will be meeting there at 4 o'clock and walking through at least part of the open space.
Thank you. City Attorney? Planning Commissioners, reports and comments.
I have something. People are asking me about micro-housing zoning. Yeah, and how those small...
The tiny houses.
Yeah, there's a different kind of zoning, and so I just kind of like to bring that up and ask about that, or if it can be brought back to us about...
Yeah, actually, we're starting to look at that, whether like a tiny house is cheaper. There are some issues around them, but looking at possibility of like being an allowed use at a higher density than we normally allow for single-family houses.
Right. So that is being...
Yeah, it's a good idea. It's one of the good tools in housing affordability.
Right. Okay. That will be brought back to us when it's...
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So wouldn't that be similar to like the cluster idea that we've talked
Actually,
about? Or?
Well, it can be like that, but actually it could end up being actually a much higher density because the typical tiny house is basically it's on a trailer frame, and so they're 8 feet, sometimes as much as 9.5 feet wide, generally less than 400 square feet. There's code issues around them because they don't necessarily have to be built to housing code standards, and they don't even necessarily have to be built to RV standards. But I would advise someone who wants one that it should be built to some kind of standard because with licensed like electricians doing the work and that kind of thing. But they can be pretty affordable. In fact. Actually, I went and looked at a dealer in Albany, and they had things ranging from $30,000 to $80,000 a piece. And I mean, the $80,000 one had copper shingles, and I mean, the guy was really tricking this thing out. But it can help with affordability. There are issues around them, but not insurmountable issues.
I have a question.
Shoot.
I'm just I sound like rerun, but is there a time frame when the public process is going to happen for rezoning Rhodes End?
Nothing formal yet.
For rezoning what? I couldn't hear.
Pardon me?
What was your question?
Roads,
Rezoning Rhodes End.
actually, I've been planning on talking to the president of the Roads End Improvement Association about that.
Who's that? Cindy Thompson. Thank you, Richard. Public comments on non-agenda items not involving a public hearing. Joe? No. Future agenda items and next meetings. Our next meeting is Tuesday, September 6, 2016 at 6 p.m.
I don't think it is.
No.
October 4th.
Another type. Am I reading the wrong one?
We'll do it October
Stacks of these.
4th. Actually, do we have?
October 4th.
Yeah, I guess the only thing that would be on the agenda right now is some final orders or final recommendations. So it could be a very short meeting.
Then we're adjourned.